recorded voice. Not recording the picture. Why? The sound.
Welcome, friends. We are gathered this afternoon to remember and give thanks for the life of the Reverend Dr. Thomas Mikelson, beloved spouse of Patricia, father to Dana, Joel, Kelly, Arwen, grandfather to Maya, Justin, Jack, and James, friend and colleague to many, and the faithful and loving minister of this church from 1989 to 2006. My name is Rob Hardies, the pastor of First Parish, and on behalf of our congregation, I want to warmly welcome you to our service this afternoon, whether you're joining us here in person or online. And I want to extend an especially warm greeting this morning to Patricia and to Thomas's family. May the memory of Thomas's life and love, and our love and care for one another, be sources of strength and solace for us today and in the days and years to come. Amen.
Good afternoon. I'm Sylvia Wheeler, Chair of the First Parish Governing Board. On behalf of our members, I welcome you to this beautiful place that meant so much to Reverend Thomas, our beloved Minister Emeritus. This welcome is also in honor of the native Massachusetts people and an acknowledgement that we now live on land that was their ancestral home and was taken from them. Please join us after the service for the dedication of this room as the Mikelson Barn Room. And also please join us after that for a reception downstairs. Thank you all for being here for this very special time together.
Thomas Mikelson was the very first friend I made in Cambridge, Massachusetts. It happened right here at First Parish shortly after my wife Susan, my son Henry, and I had relocated here following Susan's election as the president of the Unitarian Universalist Association. She sends her greetings today, friends. She apologizes that she couldn't be here, but she is at a UUA board meeting literally as we speak. Your prayers for her are also greatly appreciated. I happened to sit one pew directly in front of Thomas. And if memory serves, I think it took him 2 whole weeks before he asked me to go to lunch with him. And I readily accepted. It became a regular part of the rhythm of life for us. Thomas and I would get together for lunch, or we'd talk on the phone, and we learned quickly of all of the things that we shared in common with each other: a love for family, a love for music and particularly singing, a love for religious faith and community, and a particular passion for the teachings of one Paul Tillich and his theology. So I know firsthand, even if after the fact, just how much this church meant to Thomas, and just how much he appreciated when each and every piece of a worship service was so lovingly crafted and put together. So we begin our service today with a chalice lighting, a particular part of Unitarian Universalist worship services that was recorded earlier this week, lovingly, by my wife, the Reverend Dr. Susan Frederick Gray. May this be a time where we gather to worship. May this chalice lighting help light within us a passion, a love, and memories. Thank you, and greetings.
We light our chalice this morning with the words of Albert Schweitzer. At times, our own light goes out and is rekindled by the spark from another person. Each of us has cause to think with deep gratitude to those who have lighted the flame within us.
I'm Charity Rowley, Reverend Charity Rowley, a Unitarian Universalist minister, and I met Thomas as he began his ministry in Iowa City in the early 1970s. In 1972, or maybe 1973, I began to work with him as the paid religious educator until I left in 1980 for Boston to further my experience in the ministry. This was just as the Unitarian Universalist Association denomination was beginning to accept religious educators to come before the Ministerial Accreditation Committee to be able to become UU ministers in its work and its profession. Thomas had helped me expand my philosophical major in philosophy that is, and my preschool education theory into meeting the requirements and the examining committee. I passed, and I continued my active role in the ministry and in our denomination. Tom and I kept in touch over the years, especially when he and his family moved to the Boston area. We found time to talk about our jobs and our concerns, especially ministerial ones. It was a rich professional relationship that helped me over the years that I was actively engaged in the ministry, and then it remained a delightful friendship. The last time I saw Thomas and Patricia was for a lovely day, driving through the New England fall foliage. And now in these days, it's delightful and sad when a congregation opens their hymnals to begin to sing, "Wake Now My Senses," those words that Thomas wrote for me as I began my ministry.
Little lamb, little innocent lamb, I'm a-gonna serve God till I die. Little lamb, little innocent lamb, I'm a-gonna serve God till I die. Hypocrite, hypocrite, tell you what he do, I'm a-gonna serve God till I die. He'll talk about me, and he'll talk about you, I'm a-gonna serve God till I die. Little lamb, little innocent lamb, I'm a-gonna serve God till I die. Little lamb, little innocent lamb, I'm a-gonna serve God till I die. Devil, he's got a slippery shoe, I'm a-gonna serve God till I die. Now, if you don't mind, he gonna slip it on you. I'm a-gonna serve God till I die, 'cause there ain't no dying over there. In that heavenly land, in that heavenly land, in that heavenly land, no dying over there, no dying over there. In that heavenly land, there'll be joy, joy, joy. Just take one brick down Satan's wall. I'm gonna serve God till I die. Satan's wall gonna tumble and fall. I'm gonna serve God till I die. Little lamb, little innocent lamb, I'm gonna serve God till I die. Little lamb, little innocent lamb, I'm gonna serve God till I die. 'Cause there ain't no dying over there. No dying over in that heavenly land, heavenly land, heavenly land. In that heavenly land, no dying over there. No dying over there. In that heavenly land, there'll be joy, joy, joy. 'Cause there ain't no dying over there. No dying over in that heavenly land, heavenly land, in that heavenly land. In that heavenly land, no dying over there. No dying over there. In that heavenly land, there'll be joy, joy, joy,
A satyagrahi obeys the laws of society intelligently and of his own free will, because he considers it to be his sacred duty to do so. It is only when a person has thus obeyed the laws of society scrupulously that he is in a position to judge as to which particular rules are good and just, and which unjust and iniquitous. Only then does the right accrue to him of the civil disobedience of certain laws in well-defined circumstances. My goal is friendship with the world, and I can combine the greatest love with the greatest opposition to wrong. Nonviolence is not a resignation from all real fighting against wickedness. On the contrary, the nonviolence of my conception is a far more active and more real fighting against wickedness than retaliation, whose very nature is to increase wickedness. I contemplate a mental and therefore a moral opposition to immoralities. I seek entirely to blunt the edge of the tyrant's sword, not by putting up against it a sharper-edged weapon, but by disappointing his expectation that I would be offering physical resistance. The resistance of the soul that I should offer instead would elude him. It would at first dazzle him, and at last compel recognition from him, which recognition would not humiliate him, but would uplift him.
Good afternoon. Dr. Martin Luther King states, "Here is the true meaning and value of compassion and nonviolence, when it helps us to see the enemy's point of view, to hear his questions, to know his assessment of ourselves. From his view, we may indeed see the basic weakness of our own condition. And if we are mature, we may learn and grow and profit from the wisdom of the brothers who are called the opposition. Nonviolence is a powerful and just weapon which cuts without wounding and ennobles the man who wields it. It is a sword that heals. Nonviolence is absolute commitment to the way of love. Love is not emotional bosh. It is not empty sentimentalism. It is the active outpouring of one's whole being into another. It is the active outpouring of one's whole being into another.
My name is Preston Williams. I am the Houghton Professor Emeritus of the Harvard University Divinity School. I supervised Thomas's doctoral dissertation. We first met in the classroom when he took my course on Martin Luther King, Jr. He was a mature student with a background in ministry and graduate study at the University of Chicago. He was also a friend of the late Vincent Harding, a former professor at Spelman College, who with another Spelman professor, Howard Zinn, pioneered in civil rights activity. Vincent became one of Martin's advisors and a member of his inner circle. When Thomas took my class, he already had a deep knowledge of King. I shepherded him through the doctoral degree. When you chose him as your pastor, he became a colleague of mine. We worked together on many projects. The one I enjoyed most were the dinners at the parsonage on Francis Avenue, where Thomas cooked the meals, and Connie, my wife, and I came to know Patricia, members of their families, and a host of their friends and co-workers. The evenings were always joyful and informing. When some of my former students celebrated my career at my retirement in 2002, Thomas and other former students gave lectures in Swartz Hall, then Andover Hall, and Rockefeller Hall. The high point of the event was held in your sanctuary. Thomas orchestrated it. Our mutual friend and Harvard graduate, the Reverend Dr. Professor Charles Adams, pastor of the Hartford Memorial Baptist Church in Detroit, preached, and the church's men's chorus sang. I can't forget that event, and I think all who attended remembered it fondly. After Thomas retired, Connie and I drove along the back roads of Massachusetts, viewing some of its many fresh meandering streams, wetlands, and bridges to North Adams to visit with Patricia and Thomas. We looked at Thomas's photographs and the rich, beautiful landscape surrounding their home. Thomas was an excellent photographer. We visited the Massachusetts MoMA North Adams Museum, enjoying the unique work of Saul Lewitt. And of course, we enjoyed the meals Thomas prepared. When Thomas and Patricia returned to this area, they visited with Connie and me in our Belmont home. Thomas attended my 90th birthday and 60th wedding anniversary, and he blessed the meal. Soon thereafter, the news of Thomas's declining health surprised and overtook us. Our last time together was in Lexington at the Altria Memory Care Facility selected by Thomas and Patricia. The gathering was similar to those at the parsonage on Francis Avenue. A group of family members and longtime friends celebrated Thomas's birthday. We talked, laughed, and ate. Only Thomas did not do the cooking. He enjoyed our companionship. He looked well, and I hope to see him again. That did not happen. Thomas will live in my memory as a student and friend. Like James Luther Adams, one of my mentors, Thomas was a champion of social justice. That devotion to God and social justice was well stated in a sermon entitled "To Save the Soul of America" that Thomas preached in this sanctuary on May 19th, 1996. Some of you may remember that Martin Luther King Jr. and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference took as its mission saving the soul of America. Thomas's words on that Sunday in 1996 are as relevant now as they were then, and I quote them. Let there be no mistake that the American dream at its best is a spiritual dream. It's very close to the Unitarian Universalist dream, a land of liberty and justice for all, where everyone is a child of God and no one is deprived of opportunity because of race or religion or political persuasion or national origin or gender or sexual preference or age, and we would hope place or position of birth. For much of this century, we have been a welfare state. That is being threatened now. Let's be absolutely clear that while the welfare programs may need reform, the concept of a welfare state in which the state as a state exercises compassionate responsibility for the least fortunate and protects the welfare of all is the most advanced, the most humane, the most religiously profound, and social and economic contract in history. That is why America is a land of hope. The issues which define our current struggle as a nation are not simply struggle between Democrats and Republicans. This is no gentleman's struggle between political ideologies. It is not merely the issue that the old American left has collapsed into the middle, while much of the American right has migrated to the reactionary fringes and holds Republicans hostage. It is much bigger than all of those. It is a struggle over the soul of America. That is why churches are the places to talk about it and pray about it. King knew that years ago. And it's just as true today that now it is our struggle by the way we live, by the way we think. We are on one side or the other. The struggle for the soul of America is one of the most important, far-reaching, relevant struggles in the world today.
Amen, Dr. Williams, Reverend Dr. Williams. Well, I am Thomas's African, colored, Negro, Black, African American, Black Choctaw sister. And whenever he would invite me to come and in my ministry, wherever he was, he never asked me to sing this song. He told me I was singing this song. Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, and let me stay in. For I am weak, and I'm through the storm, and through the night. Lead me on to the light. Take my hand, precious Lord, and lead me on home, Jesus. When my way grows near, precious Lord,
precious Lord, lead me on and let me
Hi, I am the Reverend Martha Valentin, Professional Development Director at the UUA's Ministry and Faith Development Staff Group. I'm honored to have this opportunity to reflect on Thomas's gifts to me as a mentor. The first time I encountered Thomas was on a reconnaissance trip to a Sunday morning service as I explored this church as an internship site. His sermon that day was an exploration of race relations, and it wasn't even MLK weekend. He got my attention, but I did not introduce myself. I wanted my paperwork to speak for itself if I indeed applied. When I did apply, almost immediately, Thomas called me to ask me not to make any decisions about my internship site until we had had a chance to talk. I knew that this church would be ideal given its location and my lack of a car. But after having visited the possibility of being accepted as a Latina lesbian when I was one of the few in our faith, and Thomas's understanding of what that meant as a mentor made it more real. I can remember meeting with Thomas in the fall of 2000 as if it were yesterday. We hit it off and I was very comfortable with him. We talked about theology, race, our shared love of jazz, and which musicians we favored. He grew so comfortable with me that he shared that he was a Reiki practitioner and healer. I got the sense it wasn't widely known. But during my internship, we did a healing service together that was very profound as folks came forward for a blessing or laying on of hands. There were tears shed by many that day. As a mentor, Thomas went the extra mile, if one was willing. Apparently, I was a little stiff or reserved in the pulpit at first. He had me come into the chapel one evening and practice loosening up and being big and sending my voice to the back of the room. As a former WGBH radio host, I didn't need to do that. Also, I thought I was doing all of that. I learned that night how one thinks one is coming across is not always accurate. What we were doing was hard because it wasn't just about volume, but rather perception and identity and preconceived ideas of how a minister should be. There were many things we respectively disagreed on, but we were always willing and able to discuss them and learn more about each other in the process. He created a safe space that allowed me to push back if I needed to do so. Thomas was never intrusive after my internship ended, but he was always there for me. When I was called to serve at First UU Church of New Orleans right when Katrina hit, Thomas was in touch immediately. As a new minister coming out of a troubling interim year in Virginia, Thomas knew the implications at a deeper level than most. After I evacuated to Texas, I made my way to my in-laws in Maine to discern what to do next. Thomas visited for a couple of days, and we talked and cried and laughed, and he assured me that no one would fault me if I did not return. He showed me a level of compassion at such a hard time for me by truly, simply, just being with me and listening. Those who know me know I did return, despite having lost almost everything. Eventually, Thomas also came down to New Orleans with the group and helped with the recovery. Before Thomas died, thankfully, I had a chance to visit with him when he was still at home. Although he was struggling with his memory, we talked about many things and shared a few laughs. I seized the moment to confess to him that when he had asked me not to consider other internship sites, he was never in any danger of that because I had only applied to Cambridge. He was surprised, and we had a good chuckle about it, and that is my last memory of him. His bright blue eyes and generous smile laughing with me. Although I miss him, his love and attention to expressing that love to me always remains.
Song of Songs. A bundle of myrrh is my well-beloved unto me. He shall lie all night betwixt my breasts. What is thy beloved more than another beloved? His head is as most fine gold. His locks are bushy and black as a raven. His eyes are as the eyes of doves by the rivers of waters, washed with milk and fitly set. His cheeks are as a bed of spices, his lips like lilies, dropping sweet-smelling myrrh. His belly is as bright ivory overlaid with sapphires. His legs are as pillars of marble set upon sockets of fine gold. His mouth is most sweet, yea, he is altogether lovely. This is my beloved. My beloved spake to me and said unto me, Rise up, my beloved, my fair one, and come away. For lo, the winter is past, the rain is over and gone. The flowers appear on the earth, the time of the singing of birds is come. I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. He feedeth among the lilies. Whither is thy beloved gone? My beloved is gone into his garden, to the beds of spices, to feed in the gardens, and to gather lilies.
Somebody say amen. I think, Brother Litsky, that was beautiful, because this next song is the song that Thomas taught me. He didn't teach me the song, but the words of the song, he taught me to go there and to do what you just read. Thank you. I come to the garden alone while the dew is still on the roses, and the voice I hear singing so near of the songs of God discloses, and he walks with me and he talks with me and he tells me I am his own, and the voice I hear, oh, singing in my ear, the song so sweetly discloses. He speaks and the sound of his voice is so sweet that the birds hush their singing, and the melody that he gave to me, oh, so sweetly is ringing in my ear today. For he walks with me and he talks he talks with me, and he tells me I am his own, and the voice I hear ringing in my ear will so much will ever, why? Because no one else knows.
Hello, this is Dick Paul, a longtime friend of Thomas. Back in the old days, he was Mike, and he still will be Mike to me. We were together through elementary school, junior high school, and high school, plus 4 years of college at Cornell College. We had many fun times with being in athletics, both of us on the football, basketball, and track teams. The thing I remember still in my mind is the Paul and Mikelson families taking a weekly fishing trip to the Northwoods of Minnesota. This was in our later junior high years and high school years, early high school, and it was a tremendous amount of tough fun. My dad being a farmer, we had to wait until the oats harvest was completed, and then of course before school started. So it was usually the third week or so of August that we made the trip. The day that we were leaving, my dad had to finish the chores and milk the cows, but then we had supper and left and met the Mikelsons in Clarion. My folks and my brother and I in our DeSoto, and the Mikelsons in their sleek back black Oldsmobile, one of the nicest cars in town. And we made our move to go to Park Rapids, Minnesota. At that time, and of course, there were no interstates, and so it took us probably plus 10 hours to get there. Leaving at night, of course, they wanted to drive all night to get there in the morning. So the fun part of that too was that every couple of hours, parents would stop to either get gas or go to the bathroom or get some coffee. And the three of us, the kids, we were able to get out and get some ice cream or some snacks, and we did that all the way up for 2 or 3 different times. By the time we got to Park Rapids, it was still too early to go to the resort, so we had breakfast, went to the resort, checked in, and did all that kind of stuff. And then, even though we're from small town, rural Iowa, we had our first experience with the outhouse. After that, we had time to go do some fishing, not too much that day, but then early mornings, each morning, Thomas, I will refer to him as Mike, and my brother and I went with the dads out fishing, and we had quite some good time doing that. The interesting thing, of course, that at that time, no pollution in the lakes, and the lakes were so clear you could see the walleyes and the northern pike below you as you were motoring along. Later on in the afternoon, then the parents went out fishing, and we kids messed around with other kids in the resort. We had quite a nice resort area which had a pool table and ping pong and that kind of stuff. So we had a lot of fun with some of the younger friends that we would meet there. Later on, when we became drivable, got our driver's license, then the parents would let us drive into Park Rapids while they went out fishing. So we did that, and of course, at the age of high school, we began looking for the girls, and we had a lot of fun meeting up with some of the young ladies who were there with their parents. And actually, during the 2 or 3 years of our later high school years, we actually would see most of them every year. As far as our parents going out fishing, like Thomas and I began to suspect, and not until our later years, that the parents were not only going fishing, but also stopping at probably another resort to enjoy some liquid refreshments, which they did not, they always hid from us. Anyhow, the trips were just fantastic for those years, and I remember them most, basically more than anything else, with my relationship with Mike. And as I look at what's coming up with his memorial service, he had a tremendous amount of respect from his parish there, since they have renamed his, or going to rename this Bard room into the Mikelson room. He must have been an awfully fine guy, and I know he was in my relationship to him. So there's my story with Mike, or Thomas, as everybody else now knows him.
Good afternoon. I'm Jerry Ladman, a member of the Bums group from Clarion High School and beyond. The fellows all called me Jarvis. I don't know how they came up with that name, but that's the name I got. Anyway, what I'd like to do today is talk to you a little bit about two things, some of the things about high school, and then a little bit about how we reconnected again in post-retirement age as adults. You know, the group of bums that got together were pretty much a bunch of clean living, no tobacco, no alcohol sort of guys. And we had so much fun getting together. We got our name the Bums because we were originally the Slumber Bums, because occasionally we would get together to spend the evening together in one of our parents' homes, and our mom, the mother of the home, would prepare great food for us. Especially, I remember the fried chicken from Mike's home, and also from the cinnamon rolls from Geek's home. But anyway, that's how we got started. In high school, tell you a little bit about Mike. Mike was a very good student, and you could tell he was a thoughtful person, and you could tell that in the classroom. In addition to that, he was extremely good looking, and he had the attention of all the young ladies. And he was never short of having girlfriends or gals that would like to be girlfriends and so forth. Mike was also an athlete. He played football, was the punter and the running back on the football team. He was a forward on the basketball team, and on the track team, he threw the discus and the shot. But his strength was really in the high hurdles. And one of the things I'd like to tell you about Mike was that in the very prestigious Drake Relays, one of the two biggest relays in the United States at that time, in the high school division, he received a medal in the high hurdles. So that's quite an accomplishment. Mike was also a great singer. He loved to sing. He had a great tenor voice. He sang in the church choir and oftentimes did solos. And this carried over into high school also, as he participated actively in the music program, vocal music program at the school. Well, one of the things is that when we all finished high school, we all took off for college in different ways. Mike went to Cornell College in Iowa. And, but 4 years later, after we all graduated, it was time for us to get married. In those days, that's the way it went. And Mike was no exception. He had his marriage. All of the bums participated in each other's weddings and so forth. And I remember one of the things we did at Mike's wedding that probably didn't go over too well with his bride's mother and dad, who happened to be the preacher of the church. We rang the church bell late in the evening. Then, you know, after the weddings and so forth, we pretty much didn't keep in close contact with each other, but except through Christmas cards and Christmas letters, which were the vogue in those days. And till we came together again as a group at our 50th reunion in 2004. And at that time, all of the guys, plus their wives, got together for dinner one night, and we all got reacquainted in an in-depth sort of way. As a matter of fact, a couple of years later, I was thinking, here I live in Columbus, Ohio, and these guys live in Boston, back to the Midwest in Minneapolis, and Iowa City, in Chicago. Why don't I have all the group to come together in Ohio, and we can have another reunion? We did. It was so successful that for the next 10 years, we did that through 2018, when we finally decided that health conditions of some of us were just not good enough, that we should try to get together again. But that, let me comment a little bit about that post-retirement get together. Those were such rich sessions. we would sit down and talk. We would talk about reminiscences. We would talk about current events. We would talk about politics and everything. It was a no holds barred thing because we didn't have anything to hold back from. And in addition to that, we usually planned our trips such that we could visit some very interesting sites when we spent time at each other's homes or residences. So that included Boston, Cape Cod, Northwest Massachusetts, Chicago, Iowa City, Minneapolis, and so forth. And that made it a special time to get together. One of the things we learned during that time was that Mike was a darn good chef. He took great pride in his apple pies and in his steaks and delighted in preparing them for us. And one of the things that I liked particularly about the session, and with Mike in particular, was he was a great guy to get into a deep discussion on. So he and I would stay up late at night and talk about all sorts of things, including religion and so forth. In conclusion, I just want to say it's been great to have an opportunity to share these comments and observations with you. And as we all have very good recollections of Mike. But let me say that, add a couple of things. I had a great last day with Mike. Mike, my daughter lives in Boston, and I was visiting my daughter, so I arranged to get together with Mike. And this was a time when he was having his problems with his Alzheimer's. And so we sat out in his backyard a full day and just reminisced and talked, enjoying the colorful fall leaves and the sun. In my last phone conversation with Mike, and I called him several times, was when he was in his assisted living facility. And he told me, Jarv, he said, look, I can't talk right now because I've got to go get a procedure and we'll talk later. Well, we never had the chance to talk later. That's my recollection of Mike. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Robert Lindemeyer. I was a friend of Thomas Mikelson for more than 70 years. He and I and 3 other guys were called the Bums. And we got together, first of all, when we were in high school. Here's some pictures of us then. From the left is Jerry Ladman. We called him Jarvis. Next was, who's that? Oh, that's me, Robert Lindemeyer. We called me Lindy. Then came Dick Paul. We called him Deke. Then came David Schultz. We called him Rev. His father was a reverend and he became a reverend. And at the end, Thomas Mikelson. We called him Mike then, but after he went to divinity school, he was Thomas. Thomas held up those pictures many times. In fact, when we went to our first reunion in about 2010 at his home in North Adams, Mass, he had a giant blow up of that thing hung on the front porch. And it said, "Welcome, Bums." Those were those same pictures, our high school graduation pictures in 1954. Thomas had those pictures with him in the nursing home when he died, April the 17th, 2019. COVID. Now let me show you another picture. This is from when I first met Thomas, actually maybe the second year. Here I am with Thomas. I'm the crazy guy in the funny hat. And Dick Paul is on the far right. And Thomas is in the middle. He looks so much more mature than the two of us. We were little boys and he was already a young man. Now it's time to talk about the famous quartet, the Clarion High School Quartet. Here we are. I'm on the left, then Larry Obley, the top tenor, David Schultz, the bass, and Thomas Mikelson, the lead tenor. We sang together for 2 or 3 years. We had many tunes that we could do. We sang at church potlucks, high school gatherings, and we decided we were good enough that we'd try out for the Horace Heights show. That was a national radio amateur show, usually played on CBS. We went to Mason City, Iowa, and tried out, and we won the audition. So we were invited to go to Sioux City, big civic auditorium there for the actual radio broadcast. We won. And so we were invited to go to Helena, Montana. And the city of Clarion got behind us and provided money for us to take the train with our vocal coach and choral director from the high school, Wayne Cross. So the 5 of us went out to Helena, Montana, and we sang one of our best tunes, which was called Sentimental Me, and we lost. I think it was partly because here were these 4 little white boys in their blue blazers singing Sentimental Me, and the competition, among others, was a cowboy playing a guitar and singing Poor Old Kalijah. Well, the audience, and that's how Horace Heights judged the winners, was audience applause. Guess who won? The cowboy. Well, we were a little bummed out, but not too bad, because this was really the highlight of our career as a quartet. Thomas was the conference champion in high hurdles, and the state track meet was being held the next day back in Des Moines at the big blue oval at Drake University. So one of the local Clarion boosters flew out to pick up Thomas with his airplane and flew him back so he could be in the meet. What a great support that was. Well, Thomas lost, but that didn't matter. He was still our hero. And we had just a wonderful visit. David Schultz, the bass, passed away from a tragic bicycle accident almost a year before Thomas passed. And so I'm the last remaining member of the quartet. I'd like to sing a couple of bars from that tune, Sentimental Me. And we always joked about it because Thomas, as the lead tenor, always got to sing the melody, except on this tune, where the baritone, me, got to sing the opening lead. It went like this. Sentimental me, guess I'll always be so in love with you, don't know what to do. Sentimental me. Well, that's my tribute to the other bums in the quartet. May they rest in peace.
Ladies and gentlemen, on with the competition in the American Way program. It's the 4th program of our 2nd quarter. 14-year-old Sylvie Marie from Fort Wayne, Indiana's champ and the person to beat. You've already heard 3 great contestants. There's 2 more to come with the warning whistle for round 4. Introduces the Clarion High School Quartet, whom we found Tuesday night in Mason City, Iowa. These boys have a beautiful blend of voices and will go far in show business. Fellows, with the ringing of the bell, Lucky Strike wishes you good luck in your championship bid.
Sentimental me, sentimental me, guess I'll always be, guess I'll always be, so in love with you, don't know what to do.
meant to be. It was meant to be. I'm in love with you. Say you love me too. Sentimental. Quartet. Very, very nice fellows. That video was swell. Boy, the dandiest looking chaps you'd ever want to meet. Tell me, what is your name?
Dave Schultz.
Dave, how old are you?
I'm 17.
17 years old, and you're on the track team down there, Clarion?
Yes.
And they're going to fly you back tonight so you can be in the track meet tomorrow?
Yes, the state meet down in Des Moines.
Who's flying you?
The Chamber of Commerce of Clarion's provided plane for us.
That's a great Chamber of Commerce.
Sure is.
You bet it. You think you'll win for them tomorrow?
We're sure going to try.
That's the old spirit. They'll fly you, but you'll try your best, and that's the spirit. What is your name?
Bob Lindemeyer.
You're the sentimental boy that sang the solo.
Oh, yes.
Oh. How old are you?
I'm 17.
You're 17, too.
Tom Mikelson.
Are you handsome, brother? Wow. And you're on the track team, too, aren't you?
That's right.
What do you do?
I run the high hurdle.
Do you ever knock any over?
Oh, I try to get over most of them.
Now, what is your name?
Larry Obley.
How old are you, Larry?
17.
17, and what do you do on the track team?
They missed me this year.
Well, give them a nice hand. They're 12 boys.
Hi, folks. It's so good to be back here at First Parish. So good. You know, my husband and I returned to the States just a few days ago after walking the Camino de Santiago de Compostela. Pastor Rob's big thing, right? The Camino de Santiago, or the Way of St. James, it's this large network of ancient pilgrim routes dating from the 9th century. These routes stretch all across Europe and come together at the purported relics of James the Apostle in northwestern Spain. Right before I left for the pilgrimage, Patricia told me that Thomas had organized and led a pilgrimage for his students while he was religious studies professor at Cornell College, his alma mater. He and his students had donned medieval garb. Thomas was Thomas à Becket, and journeyed from Cornell College to Mount Vernon, Iowa, to Stone City. Well, I first met Thomas in September of 1989, the beginning of his ministry here at First Parish in Cambridge. He and I quickly established a rapport, probably because of his background in evangelical Christianity, which I shared, and our deep and broad interest in spiritual traditions and practices. We had shared many of our spiritual longings and musings and questions and hopes over the 31 years of our friendship. Yet I had never remembered our ever talking about pilgrimages. But as I walked the 160 miles between Porto and Santiago over the course of 11 days, I began to imagine Thomas's remarkable life as a pilgrimage. You know, pilgrimage is a characteristic of all major religions, from Buddhism and Hinduism, Judaism, Islam, to Christianity. And its roots predate those major religions, perhaps going back into prehistory. Pilgrimage is not just a spiritual practice. It is a metaphor for life's spiritual path, an outer manifestation of an inward journey. To embark on a pilgrimage means to move from one's location, one's home, and the identity bound up with that place of leaving, and to open oneself to transformation. On that journey, what was and what will be are held in creative tension in the radical now. A pilgrimage has a destination, but the destination only has meaning in light of the journey. A pilgrimage has a destination, but the pilgrim is paradoxically called to be fully present to the now of the path, to the earth one is treading, the sights and sounds of life around, to the fellow pilgrims along the way. Attending to the now, be it the inevitable blisters developing on one's feet, a fellow pilgrim in need of assistance or encouragement, or to a surprising sunset that brings you to your knees in awe and wonder. The now is essential to the meaning of the journey. A pilgrim recognizes and respects the paths of other pilgrims along the way, their pace of movement, the place they come from, the language they speak, their intentions for the journey. In fact, it is the diversity among the pilgrims that allows one's own particular journey to transcend itself and become one with the journey of all the others. Sometimes one is drawn to walk for a while alongside another, to match one's steps to theirs. And when the time is right, inevitably, one will fall behind or move ahead of the other. But when passing or falling behind, one always says to the fellow pilgrim, "Buon camino," a blessing on their way. And they offer a blessing in return. Buon camino. A pilgrim knows that the pilgrimage will end and that life after the journey will be different somehow, but in ways that are a mystery while still on the way. The destination is not just the end of a journey, but the beginning of a new path that will continue to unfold after the journey's end. So as we know, Thomas's pilgrimage began on the plains of northern Iowa. That there is a phrase that describes the guiding principle of Thomas's journey, I would say it is walking together in beloved community. Remember that first parish? Thomas was born into community, specifically a community of evangelical Christian faith in the heart of Midwestern farm country. There were planted the seeds of a nature mysticism born of the cycles of the agricultural year and a deep sense of belonging where Thomas learned that he was loved, not only by his parents and his extended family and neighbors, but also by a God who had made a claim on Thomas's life. It was there that he learned to worship, to lead and to follow, to develop and use his gifts in service of the greater good. And of course, in church, he learned to sing. When his journey took him to college and graduate school, then to teaching religious studies at the college level, he encountered humanist values and the free search for understanding, religious and otherwise. The faith of Thomas's childhood then became a little too cramped, too limiting for his growing understanding. Along this stretch of the journey, he discovered Unitarian Universalism, a tradition that made room for all the sources from which Thomas would draw his spiritual life. Zazen Buddhist meditation, contemplative Christianity, the Hindu nonviolence of Mahatma Gandhi, the Christian prophetic path of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, the liberation theology of Gustavo Gutierrez, the freedom struggles for racial, gender, sex, and earth justice. Thomas married and began to raise a family with the mother of his children, Dana, Joel, and Kelly. And his experience of fatherhood increased his respect for and wonder at the uniqueness of every person and their unfolding journey. And that experience in turn rippled out into his ministry as a mentor, not just to aspiring ministers like the Reverend Valentine and myself, but to countless young people in all walks of life whom he counseled, encouraged, cheered on, and blessed. Eventually, Thomas's spiritual journey would lead him out of his first marriage, a deeply humbling and painful experience, but one that opened space in him for amazing compassion for and sensitivity to those who struggle in relationships that bring them pain. In 1978, it was then, wasn't it, Patricia? Thomas met, and after a whirlwind 4-month romance, took that long, 3 months, 3 months romance, he married his life companion, Patricia, a poet, who in the course of their marriage finished law school and eventually became a federal judge. Patricia brought another child into Thomas's life, Arwen, her daughter, and together Thomas, Patricia, Dana, Joel, Kelly, and Arwen created a new family. Thomas and Patricia's partnership was life-giving for them both. The verses from the Song of Songs that Arthur Litsky shared with us today were read at their wedding. The passage is reflective of the depth of longing and passion in their relationship, and according to classic Jewish and Christian interpretation, it speaks of God's longing for us. In the garden, one of Thomas's favorite hymns that we heard so beautifully sung today points to Thomas's intimate relationship with and desire for the divine beloved, a desire expressed in his love for Patricia, and that also yoked him to a passionate struggle for racial justice. For Thomas, human love and a passion for justice were complementary signs of God's love for us. Thomas's doctoral dissertation that Dr. Preston Williams told us about, that dissertation was on the conception of God in the theology of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. And that dissertation was born of Thomas's conviction about God's calling to human love and human justice. Eventually, Thomas was called here to First Parish in Cambridge, where for 17 years, right? 17 years, he preached us into prophetic witness. He sang us into joy. He sat with us with our questions, our sorrows, and our grief. While among us, he was faithful to his own path, while walking joyfully alongside us as we took our next steps along the journey. Even, or maybe especially, when the blisters and exhaustion, the uphills and the rough terrain made it hard for us, his fellow travelers, to carry on. But of all the pastoral skills that Thomas possessed, and he had so many, the one of which I was most in awe was his capacity for deep presence with those who were approaching life's end. No easy answers, no platitudes, no sugar-coated promises. Thomas simply offered presence. And somehow that presence evoked hope. Hope beyond hope. Trust in the life that gives itself up to life, to that mystery beyond mystery that, in the words of Teilhard de Chardin, parts the fibers of our being in order to penetrate to the very marrow of our substance and bear us away within itself. Yes, Thomas was a lifelong pilgrim, a seeker on a journey of becoming that led him and will lead us all to the ultimate mystery of transformation, death. And when Thomas was close to the end of his pilgrimage, when forgetfulness was slowly softening the edges of his memory, I had the privilege of visiting with him, first monthly, then weekly. He was slowly letting go of that which had bound him to this enfleshed life, this life Thomas loved so much. With gratitude, wonder, and awe at the richness of his journey thus far, Thomas was trusting that the love that had breathed him into life would see him through to its end, and dare I say, beyond. So Thomas, thank you so much for walking with us. Now you have passed us by, walked on ahead. Bless you for leaving your footsteps to encourage us along. Buen camino, Thomas.
Ministry of my dear friend and colleague, Thomas Mikelson. I was blessed to have been able to serve First Parish with Thomas for the last 9 years of his ministry here, and he was instrumental with helping me establish a strong foundation for the beginning of my own ministry. From the day I arrived, Thomas was committed to creating a shared ministry with me, a model I think that was very unique in our movement and allowed for this congregation to grow and flourish. Thomas's dedication to serving all, no matter one's race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, or even theology, was a beacon for us all in creating beloved community. During our time together, I was touched by his work towards marriage equality, and I'm proudly joined in this closing by Susan Shepard and Marcia Hams, the first in Mass to get their marriage license shortly after midnight on May 17th, 2004. Our closing today is adapted from Thomas's words, delivered at Harvard's commencement in 1993. Colin Powell was the speaker that year, and it was in the height of the Don't Ask, Don't Tell controversy. And he wrote, "May all of you remain faithful to the humane values which shape this beloved community, that there shall be no place for malice, no ground for exclusion, no barrier to fulfillment based on race or sex or gender or culture or religion or ways of discerning and expressing love." And as the spirit of Thomas Mikelson touched each of us and the communities he served, now let thine be the honor and glory as we celebrate the achievements of a great man and minister and continue to follow his path of righteousness and good works. Go in peace. Blessed be. Amen.
My name is Roland Ellis. Thomas Mikelson was a friend of mine. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
honey.
Do you remember what floor he lived on?
Second.
Second floor? All right.
Bye.
Say goodbye.
Bye-bye, honey. Take care. I love you.
I love you.
Get well.
Prayer. May the nurse mark the time your breath failed against the virus without me. May the undertaker and his associate lift, lifeless, from bed. You, my love, you. May you lie neat on the pine tray in the sectioned cardboard box named for you. May the medical examiner be swift upon inquiry of your body that was mine to explore. May the fire be violet hot to consume you, broken meat offering. May the pulverizer pound cranium, clavicle, scapula, and sternum, your femur, what is left to dust.
God bless you.
Good afternoon. I'm Gloria Korsman. I'm a member of this congregation, and I joined First Parish when Thomas was our minister. And I just thank everybody who is part of this service because it helps me celebrate my gratitude for his ministry, for his preaching, for his teaching, for being our counselor, for being our friend and our companion, for teaching us our spiritual paths. Such gratitude. We'll dedicate, it's the congregation's wish to dedicate this room to Thomas's memory. And so before I begin the dedication, I want to bring to your attention that when we look out this window, we see a grave of a young woman who was enslaved, and her headstone reads, "Here lies the body of Cicely, Negro, late servant to the Reverend Minister William Brattle. She died April 8th, 1714, being 13 years old." We know very little about her life, but Reverend Brattle's life, the man who enslaved her, is well known. He was one of the ministers of this parish, and he's also buried in that burial ground. And so it is our hope that this congregation will grow in our understanding of our legacy of slavery and work to repair the harm that was done. Now may the light of these magnificent windows teach us that there is an abiding light in everyone. Preserve in us the bright faith that equality rests not upon the generosity of human affection, but on the sacred worth of every person. Amen. We dedicate this room to the memory of Thomas Mikelson, who believed deeply that the base of justice is radical love. Pray with me, please. Unseen but ever-present Spirit, draw close to us here. Let this place glow with thy presence. Fill our minds with your holy wisdom, our hearts with your eternal hope, and our wills with the courage and desire to choose the path of love. And now when I say the room will be called the Mikelson Room, I ask you to join with me in saying the Mikelson Room. So this room shall now be called the Mikelson Room.
You're invited to a reception downstairs in the parlor. There's an elevator for those of you who have more difficulty using the stairs. Thank you.